Okay, so, there's been some pretty troubling news coming out of the construction world lately, and, well, we thought it was time to dig a little deeper for you guys.
Yeah, definitely some big red flags.
This deep dive, we're focusing on Hyundai Engineering,
Right.
formerly Hyundai Construction, a huge name in the industry, and they've had just a string of really serious accidents, and it's making a lot of people question their whole approach to safety.
Absolutely. And, what we're talking about here are two specific tragic incidents that really highlight this issue. The first one back on February 25th at the Seoul Sejong Expressway construction site
Right.
near Ansong, and there was a massive collapse.
Yeah, a terrible, terrible event.
4 workers lost their lives, 6 others injured.
And we understand the authorities are now investigating possible violations of the Serious Accident Punishment Act. And that's not a slap on the wrist. That's a law with real teeth, meant to hold these companies accountable for major workplace incidents,
Right.
potentially even shutting down operations.
Absolutely.
What exactly happened there?
Well, from what we know so far, it seems like there was a failure in the support structure while they were putting a section of the upper roadway, the deck, onto a bridge pier.
Right.
So you can kind of picture it like trying to balance this huge chunk of the bridge on these temporary supports before the main structure is in place.
Yeah.
And when those supports give way, well, you can imagine the consequences.
Oh, it's devastating.
Absolutely devastating. And experts are looking into a couple of things. They're trying to figure out if there were flaws in the original design itself.
Okay, structural problems right from the start.
Exactly. Or if those temporary supports just weren't strong enough to handle the load while they were installing those massive bridge beams, the girders.
And then, not even 2 weeks later, March 10th, another tragedy hits, this time at the Hill State Apartment construction site in Pyeongtaek.
Right. This one during the process of dismantling formwork.
Formwork.
Yeah, so one worker died, another one injured, and this involved what's called a gang form. Technically, it's this large reusable mold that they use to create concrete structures. And they were moving this big unit with a tower crane.
And this is where the details get really, really disturbing.
Yeah.
It seems like they were operating the crane without detaching the workers' safety harnesses from the formwork.
Yeah.
So when that huge formwork unit suddenly shifted, it dragged those workers right along with it.
Tragic.
The Ministry of Employment and Labor is now conducting a full-blown investigation into this,
Rightfully so.
looking at whether the right safety procedures were even in place before they started using the crane. Did the workers have the proper protective gear, and was Hyundai Engineering actually following the rules laid out in the Occupational Safety and Health Act?
Yeah, that's the key legislation right there.
Right, that's the core law that sets the baseline safety standards that these companies are legally required to meet.
I
So,
like questions.
yeah, huge questions being asked right now.
Absolutely.
And, for you listening, our goal with this deep dive is to understand the bigger picture here. What's the context surrounding these awful events? We've gathered as much information as we could to try and get a clearer view of Hyundai Engineering's overall safety record. What's driving their management decisions. You want to be informed quickly and thoroughly, and that's what we're here to do, cut through the noise and help you make sense of this really complicated and troubling situation.
That's right.
So to figure out, if these recent accidents are isolated incidents or part of a larger pattern, we took a look at Hyundai Engineering's industrial accident record, and between 2021 and 2023, they recorded 531 cases.
Wow.
Now that puts them fourth highest out of the top 20 domestic construction companies.
That's a significant number, and this is data that was obtained by a National Assembly member from the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, and Transport.
Right.
For comparison, Samsung C&T had the most, with 688 cases, followed by GS Engineering and Construction with 614, then SK Ecoplant with 572.
So they're not at the very top.
Not the very top, but
Mhm.
still that high up on the list, particularly for a company of their scale and reputation that raises a major red flag, wouldn't
Yeah.
you say?
Oh, absolutely. It's hard to ignore, and then you have to factor in the leadership at Hyundai Engineering. The CEO, Woo Jung-jo. Now, his background is interesting. He's primarily known as a financial expert.
Right.
Before he took over at Hyundai Engineering, he spent his career at companies like Hyundai Steel and Kia.
Yeah, focusing on the bottom line.
Exactly. Cost efficiency, improving financial performance.
And that's where some people are starting to get really concerned.
Yeah.
Does a background so focused on finances maybe lead to a situation where safety management isn't given the attention it desperately needs?
Right.
The fact that these horrific accidents happened so soon after he took charge, that's definitely adding fuel to the fire. You have to wonder if someone's career has been all about the numbers, Do they naturally start to prioritize things differently? Is safety just another cost to be minimized instead of the absolute top priority for the well-being of their workers?
Such a crucial question. And speaking of priorities, we dug into Hyundai Engineering's 2024 sustainability report. And our analysis of that document, well, it was pretty revealing, especially when it came to how they talk about occupational safety and health.
Yeah, and the most striking thing is how much of the safety and health section focuses on the financial impact of safety and health.
Yes.
We're talking about a big chunk, like 45%, is dedicated to discussions about corporate losses, the legal costs that come with accidents, compensation for project delays, and even the increased cost of having to invest more in safety after an accident has happened.
So even when they're talking about safety, a huge part of the conversation is about how it could hurt their bottom line.
Yeah.
The report does also cover regulatory compliance, about 25% of that section. Then you have accident prevention and response at around 15%, worker safety and welfare at just 10%, and then environmental and social impact at the remaining 5%.
Right. And while all of those aspects are important, the sheer amount of focus on the financial risks, even within the discussion of safety itself, it raises some serious questions about their priorities. It suggests a perspective where safety is seen through the lens of money instead of an inherent value centered on protecting their workforce.
Now, to be fair, Hyundai Engineering did increase their investment in safety and health in 2023. It came to a total of 118.9 billion KRW.
Okay.
That's a big jump, 45% increase compared to the year before. So on the surface, that seems like a positive step.
It does, but we need to be cautious here. The full figures for 2024 haven't been released yet, and their planned safety and health budget for 2025, that's still unconfirmed. So it's vital to keep an eye on things and see if this increase in investment is a genuine long-term commitment or if it's a temporary reaction to the pressure they're facing after these incidents.
It's all about consistency and long-term commitment, exactly. And it's also important to note that this 2024 sustainability report was actually prepared before CEO Joe officially started in his role. However, it does lay out their established safety policies and overall management approach, so it still offers valuable insight into their longstanding priorities and corporate culture surrounding safety.
Definitely. And even though CEO Joe didn't write the report himself,
Yeah.
he almost certainly would have been briefed on all these critical safety issues as part of taking on the job.
Right.
So it's hard for him to completely separate himself from the company's existing safety philosophy and these tragic accidents that happened under his watch.
Absolutely. So given all of this, what has Hyundai Engineering said publicly about these incidents?
Their statements have been somewhat formal. They did issue an apology. They said, "We deeply apologize to the deceased workers, their families, and the injured." They also mentioned that they're investigating the causes of the accidents and that they're committed to accident management and implementing countermeasures to prevent future incidents.
Somewhat formal, that seems like a fair assessment. It doesn't really convey a strong sense of urgency or lay out specific concrete actions they're taking to ensure that these kinds of tragedies never happen again.
Yeah, it's lacking some of those details. And we also looked at CEO Joe's inauguration speech from January this year. He talked about achieving sustainable growth for the company and the importance of change from existing customs and practices.
Those sound like positive goals.
They do.
Yeah.
But what's interesting and maybe a little worrying given everything that's happened is that he didn't specifically mention worker safety and health or improving safety management anywhere in that speech.
Interesting.
He emphasized growth and change. But the essential aspect of protecting their workforce, it wasn't a central theme, which, again, might suggest it's not a top priority for her.
So putting it all together, it really highlights the urgent need for Hyundai Engineering to understand the gravity of these repeated tragic accidents. It's not just about figuring out what went wrong in these specific cases. It's about proactively and fundamentally strengthening their entire approach to safety management, putting strong preventive measures in place at every level, and making worker safety and health a core part of their ESG efforts.
You're talking about environmental, social, and governance.
Exactly, putting it right up there with their environmental concerns.
Absolutely. A complete change in mindset and culture is needed where safety isn't seen as a potential cost or a box to tick, but a fundamental value that drives all their decisions and plans.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive, the big question that keeps coming back to us and that we want you to think about is this based on everything we've covered, the horrific accidents, the concerning stats about their overall accident, the CEO's background in finance, and that strong emphasis on the financial risks, even within their own sustainability report when they're talking about safety. Is it possible that a focus on the bottom line might be overshadowing worker safety at Hyundai Engineering?
It's a tough question, but one that needs to be asked.
We've laid out the facts as we found them in our deep dive. Two devastating accidents, back to back. A troubling history of industrial accidents when compared to other major players in the industry. A CEO with a financial background now facing serious questions about safety. And a sustainability report that, even when it talks about safety and health, spends a lot of time talking about the potential financial hit.
It's a lot to take in.
And as you consider all of that, here's one final thought. In high-risk industries like construction, what kind of really fundamental shifts, maybe even radical ones, in both thinking and priorities do you think are needed for a company to genuinely prioritize the safety and well-being of its workers alongside its financial goals? It makes you think about the broader implications for corporate responsibility and the value we as a society place on the lives and well-being of the people who literally build our world. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Absolutely a lot to think about.